Hi there. My name's Rosalind. I was sick, fever burning, barely standing, when my own sister kicked me out of the house. My daughter was locked inside. My parents? They took her side. They said I was dramatic, that I needed space. But behind closed doors, they stole more than that. They stripped my name off the mortgage, spread lies in the neighborhood, even tried to stop me from taking my child to the ER. And when I finally cut off the money, the water, the power, that's when they started screaming. It started with a shiver I couldn't shake, the kind that settles deep in your bones and whispers that something worse is coming. I'd pushed through work that day, half asleep, aching and foggy-headed, telling myself that if I just got home, I could finally rest. Home. What a joke that word had become. The moment I stepped through the door, the smell of lavender candles and the sight of pastel baby gear slapped me in the face. Diaper bags, yoga balls, maternity pillows. Darlene's kingdom now stretched from the kitchen to the living room. My spot on the couch was buried under her robes and unopened Amazon boxes. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was raw from coughing and my head pounded like a broken metronome. Lorraine, my mother, though she rarely felt like one, looked up from her magazine. "Oh, good, you're back," she said casually, like I hadn't just spent the whole day pretending not to collapse at my desk. "Darlene's been resting, so keep your voice down." "I'm not saying anything," I rasped, hanging my coat by the stairs. She glanced at me like I was something sticky on the bottom of her shoe. "You still look sick. You should sleep in the basement tonight. It's cooler down there. Better for fevers." I blinked at her, trying to find the part of that sentence that made any sense. "The basement? You're young. You'll bounce back," she added, waving her hand dismissively. Darlene didn't even look up from her phone. She was nestled in the recliner, one hand on her round belly like she was cradling a crown jewel. I swallowed everything I wanted to scream. Mina was already upstairs asleep. I had to stay quiet. For her. That night, I curled up on an old futon in the basement, wrapped in a scratchy blanket that smelled like mildew. I didn't sleep much. The chill crept into my skin, and I coughed until my ribs throbbed. The only warmth I had came from the thought that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be better. It wasn't. I'd barely opened my eyes when I heard Darlene stomping down the stairs. "Are you serious right now?" she shouted. "Do you not care that I'm pregnant? You're up here coughing like a diseased raccoon." I sat up slowly, head spinning. I stayed in the basement, like Mom asked. "You were still breathing through the vents!" she barked. I was too stunned to respond. That's when Lorraine walked in holding a black trash bag. "Just go for a few days, Rosalind," she said calmly, like she was offering me tea. "Clear your head, let Darlene relax." "Mom, I'm sick." "You'll feel better in fresh air. You've always been dramatic when you're under the weather." Darlene planted herself in the hallway, blocking the stairs like some deranged bouncer. "Don't make this a scene, just go." I looked at her, then at Lorraine. My voice was a whisper. "Where's Mina?" "She's brushing her teeth," Lorraine replied without looking me in the eye. "She'll be fine." I hesitated. I had no idea what was real anymore. Still wearing my pajama pants and hoodie, I slipped into my shoes, grabbed the trash bag, and walked out the front door. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and cruel. I turned around to see if Mina was behind me. She wasn't. I rushed back to the door and yanked the handle. Locked. I pounded once, twice. "Mom, Mina's still inside." No answer. I ran to the window and cupped my hands around my eyes. Upstairs, the curtain moved. A small face peered out. Confused, sleepy. Her little hand pressed against the glass. "Mina, baby, it's okay," I said, trying to sound calm. "Tell Grandma to let Mommy in." I heard movement behind the door. Then a sliver opened. Lorraine's face appeared, stiff as stone. "We can't have chaos right now. She's fine. Go rest somewhere else." The door clicked shut before I could protest. I stood there, shaking, sick and alone on my own porch. My child was inside. I was outside. That night, I curled into the backseat of my car, parked right there in the driveway like a ghost haunting her own home. My coat barely covered my knees, and every breath came out like steam. My lungs burned. The world outside was silent, but the scream inside my chest refused to die. The porch light was still on. They left it glowing, probably to make the house look welcoming in case a neighbor passed by. A few did. I saw them glance over as they walked their dogs or drove home. No one stopped. Lorraine had already told them I was taking space. I called in sick to work, voice hoarse, trying to sound upbeat. "Just a little flu," I said, forcing a chuckle. "I'll be fine." I texted Lorraine once, just once. "Can I see Mina? Just for a minute?" No response. I hadn't moved much since dawn. The cold from the night had settled into my muscles, and even though the sky was a pale, clear blue now, it still felt like winter had taken root inside my bones. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat beside a granola bar I hadn't touched. It was from Lorraine. "We need to talk. Meet me at the gas station on Main at 11. No punctuation. Just that flat, transactional tone she used whenever she wanted something. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part, the part that still stupidly clung to hope, wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was her trying to make things right. Maybe she'd let me see Mina. By the time I got there, she was already waiting by the air pump in her navy coat, standing like she didn't want to be recognized. That alone should have tipped me off. I parked, stepped out, my throat still sore, my back stiff from sleeping curled in my car. "Is everything okay?" I asked. She barely looked up. "I talked to Darlene. She's still shaken." I waited. "She's pregnant, Rosalind. You can't expect her to deal with stress like this." She glanced at me, her voice cooling. "But I was thinking, you still make more than her, right?" I blinked. "What?" "She's not working. You're still getting that accountant's salary." "Lorraine, Mom, I'm not even in the house." She gave a soft sigh like she was the one burdened. "It's not about where you're staying. It's about responsibility, family." That word, family, like she hadn't locked me out 2 nights ago and pretended her granddaughter's cries didn't exist. "You're asking me to send money?" I asked, stunned. Her lips curled slightly, the way they always did when she was about to say something that sounded noble but was anything but. "Think of it as maintaining stability. For Darlene. For Mina." I took a step back. "You didn't even let me say goodnight to my daughter." "Rosalind," she said sharply, "don't be selfish. You're making things harder than they have to be." She walked off like that was the end of it. Just another errand done. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the neighborhood drugstore, not even sure why. I wandered the aisles like a ghost until I picked up a small, spiral-bound notebook and a cheap pen. I needed to write, not for revenge, not for court, just to keep track. Because lately I was starting to believe their version of things more than my own. I needed proof that I wasn't crazy. As I stood in line, I overheard 2 women talking near the pharmacy window. "I heard she got fired. Can't hold a job." Poor Lorraine, taking care of everything while Rosalind just spirals. I didn't turn around, didn't flinch. I just paid and walked out into the wind. By the time I got back to the car, my hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Shame, maybe? Or fury? I opened the notebook and wrote the first entry. Day 3. Locked out. Told I'm making things up. Asked to send money. Rumors I lost my job. I closed the cover slowly. My name was being dragged through the mud, and I hadn't even opened my mouth. I thought about when I was 16. Darlene had just failed her driving test for the 2nd time. Our parents still gave her a brand new phone for trying hard. I cleaned the dishes that night while she live-streamed with her friends. No one even said thank you. Nothing had changed. That evening, a coworker at the firm texted, "Everything okay? You've looked drained lately." I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I almost told her. About the porch, about Mina, about Lorraine's little public relations campaign. Instead, I typed, "Just life." That was enough. I didn't owe anyone the whole story. Not yet. Later that night, I started browsing apartment listings near Mina's school. Nothing fancy, just clean and quiet. I bookmarked a few. A storm was on the forecast for next week, and I wasn't sure if my car could take another frozen night. But I could. Somehow. The morning after I sent in those apartment applications, the silence came back louder than ever. No missed calls. No, "How are you?" Not even a photo of Mina from Lorraine like she used to send when she wanted to bait me into playing along. Just absence. clean and sharp. I stared at my phone long enough for the screen to dim, then darken completely. There was nothing to reply to anyway. I could have sent another text, but silence, I was learning, was not a pause. It was a message. Later that afternoon, I drove past the old street. Not to see them, just to be near it. My fingers gripped the wheel tighter as I turned the corner, where the same red pickup sat parked outside the house. Dad's, still unmoved. I used to think of him as the quiet one, the peacemaker. He wasn't cruel like Lorraine or venomous like Darlene. He just didn't engage. But that was never neutrality. That was consent with a softer coat. Growing up, anytime Darlene broke a vase or skipped school, he'd sigh and mutter something about not rocking the boat. Lorraine would twist the story into a noble sacrifice, and Virgil? He'd nod. Sometimes he'd walk away. I mistook that for kindness, but the absence of harm isn't the same as love. He let her run everything. His silence was armor, for himself, not for us. That realization cracked something in me. Not a break, just a shift, like bones realigning after years of bad posture. I had brought a small box with me, Mina's old toys she no longer played with. I thought maybe if I left them by the porch, it would show I wasn't trying to escalate anything. Just a gesture. Something soft. I stepped out, glanced around. No one was outside. The wind was dry, biting against my skin. I placed the box on the steps, about to turn back to the car, when I heard Lorraine's voice through the kitchen window. She was on the phone, loud enough to carry through the thin pain, too distracted to notice I was feet away. "No, Darlene was always the one with potential," she said flatly. "Rosalind was, I don't know, what's the word, an accident." She laughed, a short dismissive sound. "She's lucky we even let her stay as long as we did." I didn't move. My feet were locked in place. Not from surprise, not anymore. It was the confirmation, the kind that cuts deeper than the original wound. No tears, not then, just a kind of internal freezing that made my fingers burn. I walked back to the car, leaving the box right where it was. I couldn't bring myself to take it. I didn't want anything that belonged there touching me anymore. Back inside the car, I stared at the passenger seat. Mina had drawn something the day before. Her new house, she'd said proudly. It was a crooked box with 2 stick figures, one big, one little. That was it. No porch, no yard, no dog, just us. That night, I didn't wait for signs or apologies. I opened my laptop and applied for 3 more apartments, farther out but closer to Mina's school. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't trying to be understood. I was just choosing myself. It was never just what they did. It was what they allowed to happen in silence. The first bill I canceled wasn't electric or water. It was the mortgage. It came through as a soft ping on my phone, a reminder from the bank that my auto payment was scheduled in 3 days. I stared at it for a few seconds, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I opened the app, navigated to the payments section, and hit Cancel. I removed my account from the autopay settings and closed the app. A sharp calm settled in my chest. No fear, no regret. I typed a short message and sent it to Lorraine's phone. "You wanted me out. Now the finances follow." I didn't wait for a reply. The next 2 days passed in quiet. Mina and I were settling into the little apartment I'd rented. It wasn't fancy. Just 1 bedroom, beige carpet, and a drafty window that whistled every time the wind picked up. But it was ours. The rent wasn't cheap, but for once I didn't have to justify every dollar. Then the real chaos began. Late Friday night, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Darlene's name. I let it go to voicemail. 5 seconds later, another call. Then another. Then Lorraine. I muted them all. But the 6th time, curiosity won. I picked up, voice flat. "What?" Darlene's voice cracked like a whip. "You shut off the power? I'm pregnant, Rosalind. What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't flinch. "I stopped paying for what I no longer live in. You'll need to cover your own utilities now." "You're trying to kill me and my baby." I almost laughed. "I kept the lights on for 2 weeks after being thrown out. You chose this." Click. That night, the voicemails rolled in like a storm surge. Lorraine sobbing, trying to sound wounded. Rosie, please. It's not right to do this to your sister. Think of the baby. You've always been stronger than her. Be the bigger person. Funny how my strength only mattered when it benefited them. She never said she was sorry. Not once. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No missed calls, no texts, no new messages. Just the low hum of the space heater in my room, and Mina humming to herself while drawing at the kitchen table. She'd started making to-do lists for our future home. 1, pink curtains. 2, big bathtub. 3, snack drawer that's only for me and Mom. That Saturday, we walked to the grocery store. It was cold, but she insisted on wearing her little dinosaur hoodie. We stopped for hot cocoa at a corner cafe and split a blueberry muffin. She didn't ask about Grandma or Aunt Darlene, and I didn't bring them up. As we headed home, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. Not actively. I was tired, but in a clean, quiet way, like the body finally resting after carrying too much. That night, as I sorted mail and receipts, a message popped up on my phone. Darlene, you'll regret this. That was it. No greeting, no signature, no attempt at softness. I stared at it, then took a screenshot and uploaded it to a folder titled Documentation Family. I'd already started tracking things, just in case. On Monday, during my lunch break, I visited a small law firm near downtown. The consultation was free, and I didn't need much, just someone to tell me what my rights were and what to expect if Darlene escalated. The lawyer was sharp and kind. She didn't pity me. She listened, asked questions, and gave me options. When I stepped back out into the wind, I zipped up my coat and exhaled. I wasn't afraid of the next storm. I'd walked through it barefoot once. This time, I carried my own umbrella. There are moments in life when silence is strategy, but then come the moments when silence is surrender, and I was done surrendering. It started with an envelope. Ordinary, except the seal had been torn and resealed with clear tape. A forwarded bank statement, addressed to my new apartment, clearly tampered with. I sat at my desk at work, staring at it for a full minute before pulling up the camera footage. I'd installed a small security cam near my mailbox when I moved in, just in case, just like the lawyer had advised. The footage loaded, blurry at first. But then, there she was, Darlene, clear as day, using a key to open my mailbox. Her hoodie was pulled low, but I knew that posture, that smug little head tilt she always gave herself when she thought no one was watching. I exhaled slowly, paused the video, and saved the clip in the legal folder I'd created on my desktop. By lunch, I'd drafted the email. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I just told the truth, line by line. Attached were screenshots, flirty messages between Darlene and a man named Caleb, dating back 6 months. One text in particular, I wish I could say it's yours, but I honestly don't know anymore. Another, we should have been more careful. Lorraine is going to kill me if she finds out. I also attached the voice memo, an accidental recording from weeks ago, when Lorraine didn't realize her call with me was still connected. Her voice was faint, but clear enough. I don't even know who the father is, but if she plays it right, we might still get some help. The recipients of the email, Lorraine, Virgil, Darlene's ex-husband's lawyer, and our cousin Mayra, who always had a foot in both camps and a big mouth. Subject line, you wanted truth. No greetings, no explanation. I clicked send. By 3 p.m., the hurricane landed. Darlene showed up in the parking lot of my office like a scene out of a reality show. Hair a mess, eyes wild. She screamed across the lot, hands flailing like she was auditioning for a part in some cheap drama. You think you're so righteous? You're a bitter, lonely hag. You'll die alone and still blame me for it. People stopped to watch. My manager peeked through the window blinds. I didn't go outside. I called security and calmly described the woman outside as a domestic issue. I told them I was concerned for my safety and that she was not to be let into the building under any circumstance. Later that evening, I played back the voicemails. Lorraine's voice, weepy and manipulative. You didn't have to take it this far. Family keeps things in the family. Family, that word again. Weaponized, twisted, thrown like a rope I was expected to tie around my own neck. I saved the voicemails too. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the post office about mail theft. The clerk gave me a pamphlet and told me to follow up with the local police station. Then I headed to the courthouse. A free legal clinic was hosting a drop-in day for civil issues. A paralegal walked me through paperwork for a cease and desist. "Would you like to press charges?" she asked gently. "Not yet," I said, "but I want this on record." She nodded. "Smart move." When I stepped out of the courthouse, my shoes clicked loud on the concrete. I walked taller, head higher. I wasn't the whisper in the hallway anymore. I was the alarm. That night, Mina came home with a crumpled piece of construction paper. "Look, Mommy!" It was a drawing of a superhero. Purple cape, black boots, flames in the background. She'd scribbled my name, well, her version of it, across the top in bright pink crayon. "Is this me?" I asked, trying not to laugh. She nodded with a grin. "You're the strongest." I didn't correct her. I didn't say I wasn't a hero. I just hugged her and whispered, "Close enough." 3 days had passed since I filed the cease and desist. I hadn't heard a word back from Darlene or Lorraine. I knew better than to think that meant peace. It just meant the wind had shifted, and storms are always quiet before they rip everything apart. I was sipping coffee in my apartment, half reading a report for work, when the first blow landed. I got tagged in a Facebook post. The caption screamed in all caps, "Some people pretend to be victims after abandoning their own family." I was 8 months pregnant and homeless because of her. A photo of Darlene crying, belly pushed forward like a stage prop. The lighting dramatic, like she was auditioning for sympathy. The comments came fast. "She did what? Disgusting. Who does that to their pregnant sister? You're stronger than me, girl. Keep your head up." And the worst of all, Lorraine, chiming in like it was Sunday brunch gossip. "Sometimes daughters forget where they came from." I wasn't shocked. Not anymore. But it still stung, like an old burn being scratched open. I didn't reply. Not yet. I screenshotted every word and saved it. I was going to need it. That afternoon, I picked up Mina from school like usual. She came out of the building slower than usual, her little backpack dragging behind her. "Hey, baby, you okay?" She didn't answer, just climbed into the car and fastened her seatbelt. It wasn't until we got home that she burst into tears. "She came to school," she sobbed. "She said if you don't stop being mean, they're gonna come and take me away." Who said that? I already knew, but I asked anyway. "Auntie Darlene. She was by the fence. Miss Ray saw her and told her to leave." I called the school immediately. Miss Ray confirmed everything. Darlene had shown up unannounced at dismissal and tried to speak to Mina, even after being asked to leave the premises. That night, I didn't sleep. I called my lawyer first thing the next morning. "We're filing for a protective order," I said flatly. "She came after my daughter. That's the line." "Understood," she replied, not missing a beat. "Gather every piece of communication. I'll draft the emergency filing today." I emailed the school for a written statement, saved the audio of Mina crying, her voice shaking as she described what Darlene had said. I added screenshots from the Facebook post, Lorraine's comment included. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was harassment. Later that night, after Mina had gone to bed, I logged on to Facebook. My hand shook slightly, not from fear, but because I knew that this was it. The moment I stopped playing defense, I typed slowly, deliberately. "I don't use this platform to argue, but I will use it to protect my daughter. Any future lies, threats, or attempts to intimidate me or my child will be handled through legal means. This is not a threat, it's a boundary. No hashtags, no dramatics, no names, just facts." I hit post. My inbox filled within the hour. Messages from high school friends, coworkers, distant cousins. Honestly, I always suspected something was off with Darlene. "I've seen how your mom talks about you. It's not okay. Good for you for standing up." Support I never asked for, but for the first time I didn't reject it. I let it in. The next day I took Mina to school myself, walked her in, made eye contact with every adult in that building so they'd know, this child is protected. This mother is not afraid. Back home, I opened the email from my lawyer. The subject line read, "Protective order filing draft attached." I didn't open it yet. I just stared at the subject for a while, not because I was unsure, but because I was proud. Because when they tried to paint me as unstable, ungrateful, unworthy, What they didn't count on was that I was watching, documenting, building my case while they built their lies. They were loud, but I was thorough. And this time, I wasn't backing down. It was a Thursday when the envelope arrived. I'd just gotten back from picking Mina up from school. She was humming some Disney song and kicking her shoes off at the door when I noticed the thick white packet tucked among the junk mail on the counter. My name in small impersonal print. No return address. I opened it slowly. Legal papers. I recognized the format instantly. Property title transfer confirmation. I flipped through the pages, reading in disbelief. The house. The one I had spent years contributing to. Mortgage payments, upkeep, repairs while everyone else made excuses. It had been signed over. To Darlene. No notice, no discussion, just done. Stapled to the back was a typed note from Lorraine. She's having a baby. She needs stability. It's not personal. Not personal? I stared at the wall for a long time. Mina had turned the TV on and was watching cartoons. I couldn't even focus on the sound. My ears were ringing. I wasn't just erased. I was replaced. I closed the envelope and placed it gently in the drawer under the sink, like I didn't want to give it the dignity of my rage. That night, I set my alarm for early morning. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. Instead, I made a list. Things I needed to finish, finalize, shut down. I needed control of something, even if it was just my to-do list. But the universe had other plans. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I heard a sharp gasp from Mina's room. Then a cry. I ran in. She was curled in a ball, clutching her stomach, her forehead damp with sweat. "It hurts, Mommy," she sobbed. "It really hurts." I threw on a jacket over my pajamas, grabbed my keys and wallet, and scooped her into my arms. We made it to the front door, and that's when I saw her. Darlene, standing at the base of the stairs, arms folded like she belonged there. Her belly looked bigger than ever under her hoodie. "You're not taking her anywhere until we talk," she said. I blinked. "What?" "You heard me," she snapped. "You've been spreading lies and now you think you can just run away with her? She's in pain. Move." I said we need to talk. I didn't let her finish. I stepped forward, shielding Mina in my arms, and shoved Darlene aside with my shoulder. She stumbled back, caught herself on the railing. "Don't you touch me!" she shrieked. "Then don't block a mother trying to get her child to the hospital," I shot back. Mina whimpered against my chest. I could feel her shaking. A neighbor opened their window across the lot. Someone called out, "Everything okay?" "No," I answered, breathless. "Call the police." And then I was moving, running, unlocking the car, settling Mina in the back seat, heart thudding so hard it felt like my ribs were about to snap. Red and blue lights arrived minutes later, washing over the complex like a warning flare. Darlene was yelling something about being assaulted. I didn't respond. I just handed the officer my ID and pointed at Mina, who was now pale and quiet in the back seat. "She needs help," I said. "That's all that matters." One officer took Darlene aside. Another waved me forward. "Follow the ambulance," he said. We arrived at the hospital just before 4 a.m. appendicitis, emergency surgery. The doctor said if we'd waited another hour, it could have ruptured. I sat beside her hospital bed as machines beeped and monitors blinked. She was asleep, finally calm, her tiny hand wrapped around two of my fingers. Later that night, after the surgeon checked in and the nurse changed her IV, one of them lingered at the door. "She asked about her aunt," the nurse said gently. "She wanted to know if she was coming back." I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "Not anymore." The nurse nodded slowly and left us alone. I leaned back in the chair, exhausted. But more than that, done. They'd taken the house. They'd lied, manipulated, twisted my every move. And now they'd tried to stand between me and my child's health? That wasn't just betrayal. That was dangerous. Whatever came next, they could spin their stories and play victim all they wanted. But this time, I had police reports, hospital records, and a child's trust in her mother that no one, no paper, no signature, could take away. The first light of morning slipped through the blinds, casting faint stripes across the floor. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, its vibration low but insistent. I hesitated before reaching for it, still groggy. I wasn't expecting anything, certainly not from that app. It was the mortgage portal. The one I hadn't touched in over a year. The same portal that once kept me up at night, calculating balances, checking payment dates, rereading statements, second-guessing everything. Since the day I signed away my part of the house, washed my hands of that cold, joyless structure, I had left it behind. Or so I thought. Curious more than anything, I tapped the notification. The app opened slowly, like it knew what it was about to reveal. And there it was, in bold red. Final notice, foreclosure initiated. Past due balance, auction scheduled, legal action pending. I stared at it for a long moment. No panic, no guilt. Just stillness. Then, I pressed delete. Let them handle it. Let them sort through the wreckage of what they fought so hard to control. That house had never been a home. Not for me. Not for anyone who wasn't willing to bend and break to fit into its pristine mold. They had obsessed over appearances, over discipline, over power. And now, they could own the collapse too. I turned over and looked at Mina, still wrapped up in her blanket, her face soft in sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell in that slow, steady rhythm only children have. She was everything the house had never been. Warm, alive, safe. She was home. Later that day, after dropping Mina off at daycare, I found myself reaching for the bananas on the counter. They were just ripe enough. I didn't want banana bread. I wasn't even hungry. But I needed the motion, the routine, peel, mash, mix, the way the batter came together slowly with each stir. The warmth that spread through the apartment as it baked. It felt good to create something that wasn't for survival or appearance, but for comfort, for calm. When the timer went off, I didn't even eat a slice. I just stood there, breathing in the scent of cinnamon and vanilla and toasted sugar. My apartment smelled like life. Not the museum silence of the house I grew up in, with its designer furniture and rules about coasters, but real life. Imperfect and alive. Then the phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. Out of state. I paused, thumb hovering over the screen. Something in me knew. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later the transcript began to load, but I didn't wait. I played the message. Her voice hit me like a brick. "Rosie, it's me, it's Darlene." She was crying. Not the performative kind I remembered from childhood tantrums or teen drama. This was real, raw. "I'm at the hospital. They said it's early, but it's happening. I can't reach Virgil, and Mom's not answering. I didn't know who else to call." She took a breath, shaky and shallow. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm scared, Rosie. I don't know what to do. I need someone, please." There was a time when that would have shattered me, when her voice, full of fear, would have pulled me right back in, would have made me forget the way she gaslit me, betrayed me, turned the family against me, how she made my pain a punchline. But that time had passed. I pressed delete. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, just necessity. There was no victory in it, no satisfaction, just space. Silence. And for the first time in a long time, a kind of peace. The next morning, I had an appointment at the hospital, unrelated to Darlene. I wasn't there to check on her or offer support. I went to the administration desk to request a permanent update to my family contact records. I had already taken my name off all emergency contact lists months ago, but this time, I wanted written confirmation. I wasn't going to be summoned back into the chaos through some clerical oversight. The receptionist looked up from her computer and asked, "Would you like to designate a new next of kin for Miss Darlene R.?" I met her gaze without flinching. "No. And if she lists me again, I will treat it as a violation of my personal and legal boundaries." She blinked, then nodded slowly. "Understood, ma'am." Outside, the wind had picked up, tugging at the hem of my coat. I exhaled as I walked to the car, the cold air sharp but clean. I picked up Mina from daycare a little early, just because. She ran out with a crown made of glittered construction paper and a popsicle stick glued to the front. "Mommy!" she shouted, grinning. "I'm a sparkle queen." I scooped her up. "That's the most powerful kind. Can we make cookies tonight?" "Absolutely." On the way home, she got quiet for a while, her fingers tracing the window. Then softly, "Is Aunt Darlene gonna die?" The question caught me off guard. My hands tightened on the wheel. I didn't pull over, though I wanted to. "She's at the hospital," I said carefully. "She'll be taken care of. Just not by us." Mina nodded once. "Okay." That night, we made chocolate chip cookies. Burned the first tray because we were dancing too much. I wore a dish towel cape, and she wore my sweatshirt like a gown. "Super Mama!" she shouted between giggles. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed like that. After her bath, I tucked her in. She looked up at me, eyes half closed, and whispered, "I'm glad it's just us now." My heart twisted, but in a way that felt honest. "Me too, baby," I said, brushing hair from her forehead. Later, I lay in bed, wide awake but calm. No missed calls, no guilt-tripping messages, no news from Lorraine, just stillness. And in that quiet, something I hadn't felt in years bloomed inside me. Not pride, not triumph, just space, just breath, freedom. The mail came late that day. Mina was already fast asleep, her face soft in the glow of her nightlight, a smudge of chocolate still clinging to her cheek from the cupcake she'd begged to eat before dinner. I had wiped her hands, combed her hair back, read her favorite book twice, but somehow that little streak of frosting had survived. It made me smile. Outside, the air was cooler than usual for Austin, and the sidewalk still held on to the day's heat. I walked barefoot to the mailbox, expecting the usual: flyers, utility bills, maybe a delayed Amazon envelope I forgot I ordered. I shuffled through the stack without much interest, ready to toss most of it straight into recycling. Then I saw it. An off-white envelope, slightly bent at the edges like it had traveled through several hands before landing in mine. My name was written across the front, unevenly in familiar handwriting, slanted, hesitant. Virgil. I stood in the doorway for a long while, the envelope in one hand, mail in the other, unsure what to feel. I didn't open it right away. I didn't even go straight to the couch. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the sink for a few moments, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge. I wiped down the counter even though it was already clean, rearranged the fruit bowl, adjusted a crooked magnet on the refrigerator, all stalling, all small rituals to brace for something bigger. Finally, I sat down and opened it. The letter wasn't long, barely half a page. The paper was plain, no return address, just folded neatly like it had taken him days to get it right. "I don't know if you'll ever read this," he began. He said he was living in a small one-bedroom now. Not much space, but quiet. His words made it sound like a confession, not a complaint. He wrote about Lorraine, how she hadn't spoken to him since the foreclosure, how the silence between them had grown like mold in a forgotten corner. He wrote that he thought staying quiet during all those years was the same as keeping the peace. "But I see now," he wrote, "that silence was the loudest betrayal of all." I waited for a wave of something, tears, anger, even pity, but none came. Not because I didn't feel. I felt everything. But what settled in was a clear, quiet kind of knowing, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it away in the back of my desk drawer, right behind old bank receipts and Mina's first attempts at drawing people. Stick figures with giant heads and wobbly smiles. The letter didn't need a spotlight or a frame. It just needed a place to rest, like truth. Late, but here. That Saturday, the weather finally shifted. After a week of gray skies and sluggish drizzle, the sun pushed through. I packed a small picnic, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches cut diagonally the way Mina liked, some apple slices, 2 juice boxes, and a cookie wrapped in foil. We walked to the park hand in hand, not saying much. The light felt softer, the breeze kinder. Mina laid the blanket down herself. I sat with a book while she worked quietly in her sketchpad, tongue between her teeth, using colored pencils worn down to stubs. I didn't ask what she was drawing. I just let her be. When she was done, she passed the paper to me without a word. "This is us," she said, beaming. The drawing was simple. 2 stick figures, one tall with messy curls, one short with a big red heart on her shirt. "Just us," she added, as if to mark the boundaries of our world. "That's more than enough," I said, and meant it. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. Lorraine's number, again. No voicemail, no text. Just that tired pattern she liked to use. Just enough to stay on my mind, not enough to say anything real. I looked at the screen until it went dark. Then I went into my contacts and blocked the number. Not in anger. Not to make a statement, just because I didn't need the static anymore. I whispered to myself, almost without thinking, I forgive you, for me, not for you. It wasn't some grand healing moment. It was a release, like unclenching a fist I hadn't realized was tight. And then I opened the old family group chat, years of messages, fake cheerful greetings, happy Thanksgiving from us with matching outfits, passive-aggressive jabs disguised as just jokes. Photos I was cropped out of, invitations I never responded to, memories I didn't ask to keep. I pressed and held the thread, hit delete. It was like cutting a rope. The boat drifted off. No explosion, no collapse, just a quiet departure. Gone. But not mourned. Monday came with news I hadn't expected. My supervisor called me into a meeting, nothing serious, just a check-in, or so I thought. But then she smiled and said she was offering me a promotion. Senior financial analyst, a team of my own, more autonomy, a raise. I nodded, grateful, proud, but I didn't text anyone. That night, Mina and I baked cupcakes again. She insisted on cracking the eggs herself. I let her. Half the shells ended up in the garbage, the rest in the batter. We laughed so hard we forgot to set a timer. Frosting ended up on the wall. I left it there. After she fell asleep, cheeks sticky and content, I sat by the window with a blank journal on my lap. I held the pen for a moment, then wrote slowly. I am not who they said I was. I am who I became when I left. I didn't need applause, didn't need to be seen or praised or forgiven. I had something far better now. Peace. Before I let you go, let me leave you with this. We don't always get to choose the family we're born into, but we do get to choose the boundaries we set. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for your child is walk away from what hurts, even if it's tied to your last name. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And peace didn't come wrapped in apologies. It came when I stopped begging people to see my worth and started living like I knew it myself. So if you're out there holding your breath for someone else to do right by you, maybe it's time to start doing right by yourself. You're not selfish for protecting your peace. You're not wrong for choosing better. You're not weak for letting go. And if you're still in the storm, I see you. You're not alone. What about you? Have you ever been pushed so far that you had no choice but to let go? What would you do if your own family turned against you? Tell me in the comments. Drop a 1 if this story hit home for you, or share where you're watching from. And if this story didn't quite sit right with you, I want to hear that too. Your voice matters here. And hey, if you want more stories that speak truth, stir emotion, and remind us all how strong we really are, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. You never know. Next time, it might just be your story that helps someone else heal. Thanks for listening. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, I'm Amy. They didn't just leave me out of Grandpa's will reading. They made sure I never even knew it happened. No call, no message. Just a closed door I was never meant to reopen. But what if the truth didn't need their permission? What if the land they tried to steal had already been signed over to me, years ago? They rewrote the story. But Grandpa left the receipts. Do you ever wonder how far your own family would go to erase you, and what happens when you come back with the proof? They didn't tell me he was gone. I found out the way strangers do, through the newspaper. Tucked between a used car ad and a photo of the local high school baseball team was the obituary. Silas Vexler, beloved father, grandfather, mentor, passed away peacefully at home. Peacefully. The word rang hollow. No one called me. No one thought to. I booked a one-way ticket to Burlington that night. I didn't call ahead. I didn't ask permission. And I didn't expect anyone to be waiting. By the time the cab turned off Main and into my parents' neighborhood, the early spring chill had turned my fingers stiff. The house still looked the same. White siding, navy shutters, perfectly trimmed hedges. Only colder now, like someone had drained the warmth and sealed the windows shut. The porch lights were off. I rang the bell twice before I heard the familiar shuffle of my mother's steps. She opened the door halfway and blinked like she'd seen a ghost. Amy, she said flatly. No hug. No, how was your flight? Just my name, like an afterthought. I came for Grandpa's memorial. She stepped aside. Of course, the service is tomorrow. I walked in. The air smelled like furniture polish and stale lavender. They'd redecorated. Gone were the bookshelves lined with Silas's photographs. Gone was his old leather armchair. Instead, sleek glass, sterile corners, not a single thing that looked like it belonged to someone who once taught me how to spot hawks, just by their shadow. Dad came down the stairs, pausing mid-step. Didn't expect you, he muttered, tightening the belt on his cardigan. No one called. He looked at Mom, then back at me. Thought Delaney would have handled that. I didn't reply. What was there to say? The guest room door creaked as I pushed it open. Still the same flower print wallpaper, same squeaky dresser, but no photos. Not one. Not even the picture of me and Grandpa on the dock the summer I turned 12, the one he used to keep next to the lamp. I unpacked in silence and tried to sleep. The next morning, I woke up early, dressed in black slacks and a navy blouse, tied my hair back in a low bun, and drove myself to the memorial. The community hall was packed. Silas had meant something to this town. I stood at the entrance for a few seconds, letting my eyes adjust to the fluorescent lighting. People glanced my way, some offering tight-lipped smiles, others avoiding my gaze entirely. Delaney spotted me. She was near the front, talking with the mayor's wife. Her dress was a soft gray, her posture perfect. She waved, half-heartedly, and returned to her conversation. Not once did she come over. A woman at the table by the door handed me a printed program. Here you go. Oh. She checked the list. Sorry, seating's mostly arranged. There's space in the back row. I followed her pointed finger to a folding chair near the restrooms, next to a mop bucket and a tray of cold coffee. I sat down. The chair wobbled on uneven tiles. When the slideshow began, I watched frame after frame of Silas's life. Him holding Delaney as a baby, teaching her to ride a bike, giving a speech at her graduation. Not once did my face appear. Not once did my name pass the lips of anyone who stood at that podium. Even the eulogy painted a picture I couldn't recognize. He adored his family, one man said, especially his daughter Corinne, his brilliant son-in-law Eldrick, and his devoted granddaughter Delaney. I was invisible. On purpose. During the reception, I tried to keep to myself, hovering near the coffee table, sipping burnt brew from a paper cup. An older woman approached me, someone who used to work with Grandpa at the university. I remember you, she said with a gentle smile. Amy, right? You used to paint birds. I nodded. He spoke about you, she added, then leaned closer. Not recently, but he used to. I thanked her politely. What else could I do? Ask her why he stopped, why they all did. Just as I was grabbing my coat to leave, I passed by the coat room and heard voices, hushed, fast. She wasn't on the list, Delaney was saying. We made sure of that. I told you it would come back to bite us, my mother whispered. We should have said something. Delaney snapped. She left. She cut herself off. She doesn't get to waltz in now and play the grieving granddaughter. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. They made sure of it. They made sure I would be a ghost at my own grandfather's goodbye. Then I guess it's time I remember for both of us, I said, turning to Norma with steady eyes. She didn't answer. She just gave the faintest nod, like she'd been waiting for me to stop surviving and start acting. The next morning, a soft fog hung low over the town, the kind that clings to windows and makes everything feel quieter than it is. I walked to the gallery early, before the parking lot filled up, before the whispers started circling again. The town was holding a public exhibit in Silas's memory. My mother's idea, of course. Legacy through art, the posters said. My mother, ever the strategist, had coordinated the entire event with the local arts council, down to the ribbon color on the brochure table. She knew how to dress grief up in silk and call it reverence. Inside the gallery, the space was dim but curated. Spotlights fell softly on enlarged photographs, arranged in a timeline. Silas as a boy in suspenders, Silas at his wedding to my grandmother, Silas receiving an honorary degree. Each section was labeled with a small brass plaque. Teacher, husband, visionary, father. I walked slowly, taking it all in, and then I got to the final wall. The last panel was titled, His Greatest Pride. It was a family collage. Smiling faces, holiday dinners, graduation hugs. Delaney appeared 7 times. My mother and father at least 5. There were even 2 photos of Silas holding my cousin's newborn. But nowhere was I. A high school friend I hadn't seen in years came up behind me, holding a tiny plate of cheese cubes. "I thought you moved away," she said, half chewing. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That wall had already spoken for me. I kept my hands folded tightly in front of me as I moved to the reception table. Every conversation I passed was a variation of the same theme. Grief packaged neatly, respect performed like theater. My parents moved through the crowd like seasoned diplomats. Corinne laughed a little too perfectly. Eldrick gripped shoulders, making strong eye contact with men who mattered in town. During the closing remarks, my Uncle Nathan, Dad's older brother, was invited to say a few words. He stepped up to the podium with a mix of grief and smugness. "Silas was a man who understood loyalty," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "Some of us stayed by his side till the very end. He knew who truly cared." He didn't have to look directly at me. The silence that followed did all the pointing for him. My father, seated in the front row, gave a satisfied nod. Delaney leaned over and whispered something in his ear, and they both smiled like co-conspirators in a small, clean crime. I smiled too. Not because I felt it, but because I wouldn't let them be the only ones performing. After the speech, I tried to speak with Royce Trenton, Silas's lawyer. He was standing by the punch bowl, half listening to my mother talk about tax-deductible donations. I waited until there was a pause, then took a step forward. "Royce, could I ask?" But before I could finish, my mother looped her arm through his and said, "Oh, Royce, there's someone I want you to meet. Just a moment, Amy." She didn't even glance at me. He was gone in 3 steps. I didn't try again. What was the point? As I turned to leave, Delaney brushed past me, her voice low. "You left a long time ago, Amy. You can't just walk back into the middle like nothing happened." She didn't wait for a response, but something inside me shifted then. Not just anger, but understanding. This wasn't oversight, it was architecture. They weren't just leaving me out. They were building a version of our family without me in it. I stayed behind as the gallery began to empty. The cleaning staff started stacking cups and folding linen napkins. I wandered toward the back hallway, toward the old student showcase wall, where, once, Silas had hung up one of my watercolor paintings of lakebirds. It was gone. In its place was a framed print of Delaney standing next to the mayor, receiving some kind of Young Civic Leader award. The frame was gilded, her smile triumphant. My breath caught, not in sadness, but in clarity. I'd spent so long wondering if I had exaggerated the distance, if I'd imagined being forgotten. I hadn't. They'd made it real, framed it, and hung it on the wall. I didn't notice Norma until she was standing next to me, a paper plate of uneaten cookies in her hand. "Not everything was meant to be erased," she said softly. "But they're trying." I turned to her slowly. She looked older than I remembered, smaller, like time had carved pieces from her, but left the spine intact. "They can try," I said, "but I still remember, and I think it's time I remember for both of us." She didn't nod, didn't smile. She just touched my elbow gently and left her cookies on the table before walking out into the fog. I stood in front of that wall one more time, not crying, not hurt, just resolved. If they wanted to rewrite history, they were going to have to burn a few chapters, because I hadn't forgotten. And now, I wasn't going to stay quiet about it either. The document sleeve was dusty, but untouched, in his handwriting, "For Amy," before anyone else. I sat back on my heels, still crouched beside the loose floorboard in the corner of the cabin. There was no ceremony to the moment, no spotlight or music or chorus of apology. Just my name written in that familiar, slanted script I hadn't seen since the last birthday card he ever sent me. I pulled the envelope from the compartment carefully, as though it might disintegrate in my hands if I moved too quickly. It didn't. It was solid. Real. Which is more than I could say for anything else I'd been offered from my family lately. The cabin creaked in the wind outside. The sky had gone from overcast to deep gray while I'd been inside. A storm was probably moving in, but I didn't care. I stayed. There was a folded letter inside the envelope. No wax seal, no legal stamp, just 3 sheets of thick paper and the smell of old ink. And beneath the letter, flattened, neatly folded, encased in a plastic sleeve, was a property deed. My name typed clearly on the line next to grantee. The signature date was nearly 2 years earlier. Witnessed. Filed. No one else's name was on it. Just mine. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat on the floor, both knees tucked beneath me, reading the words of the only person who had ever looked at me and seen more than a disappointment or a problem to solve. I know this isn't the way you should receive this. You should be hearing it from me, looking me in the eye. But if you're reading this, it means they found a way to cut you out. Again. And I failed to stop it in time. This land, the cabin, the water, the trees, isn't just property. It's breath. It's memory. It's the only place that ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere beyond a job title or a last name. And it was only ever supposed to be yours. Because you understood that. You saw it. I folded the letter back slowly and slid everything into my bag. By the time I stepped out onto the porch, the rain had started. Light, steady. I didn't bother running to the car. The walk back through the woods was quiet. I let the water soak into my shirt, my shoes, my hair. Let it rinse something off me. The bitterness, maybe. Or at least the layer of numbness that had made me think I didn't care anymore. That night, after a hot shower and a dry sweater, I made myself tea and sat at the edge of my old twin bed, scrolling through the digital county records on my laptop. I typed in the parcel number from the deed, and sure enough, the document had been filed. Legally binding, verified. The only transfer I saw afterward was a pending correction submitted months later by someone named E. Malroe. I didn't need a family tree to know who that was. I shut the laptop and stared at the wall across from me. This was no longer about a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, a transaction, an erasure by design. The next morning, Norma called. "I have something else," she said. "You'll want to see it before they do." She met me outside the back kitchen door. Same apron, same calm voice. She handed me a small square metal tin with her initials etched on the lid. "He gave me this a while ago, said to hold on to it for you. Only you." Inside was a silver key and another folded note. This one shorter, scrawled in what looked like a hurry. "Cabin, south wall, third beam, you'll know it." I left before breakfast, didn't wait to be noticed. Drove out of the neighborhood, through the edge of town, and back to the cabin like I had every right in the world to be there. Because I did. It took some time to find the exact spot. I had to move a shelf that had grown roots into the floor, but eventually I found it. One beam out of place, a groove carved beneath. I slid the key into the hidden lock, twisted gently, and heard the soft click that told me something had just given way. Beneath a panel, tucked into a hidden box no larger than a shoebox, was a second folder. Inside, copies. Silas's copy of the same deed. Bank statements. A list of improvements he'd paid for himself. Receipts with his signature. Everything documented. Everything timed before his health had started failing. There was even a typed letter to his attorney, Royce, requesting confirmation that the transfer had gone through without objection. And yet here I was, sitting on a cabin floor, with more evidence in a secret box than had ever been shared with me openly. Later that evening, the sky finally cleared. The lake shimmered in the fading light. I stood on the porch with the deed in one hand and the letter in the other. A part of me wanted to drive straight to my parents' house, slap it all on their dinner table, and ask them what kind of people turn legacy into leverage. But instead, I stayed. I stayed because it wasn't about them anymore. Not really. It was about the promise that had been made in quiet moments between me and my grandfather, in walks by the lake, in early morning coffee on this very porch. Those things weren't loud. They weren't official. But they were real. And now, I had proof. Not for them. For me. They'd written me out. But he had written me in, first. The screen showed 0003 seconds. Corinne hadn't noticed. But I had heard just enough. I didn't press stop. I didn't need to. Whatever she handed that courthouse clerk in the thick manila envelope, whatever paper trail she thought she could quietly redirect, it was too late. My hand trembled a little, not from fear, but from something colder, sharper. I slipped my phone into my coat pocket and walked across the parking lot like I was on my way to buy milk. Inside the car, I sat for a minute. The heat hummed against my face, drying the sweat I hadn't realized was forming at the back of my neck. I stared out the windshield at the courthouse doors as they slowly closed behind her. She didn't look back. I drove back to the cabin. The road curled with memory. Every curve felt like a question he had once asked me. What would you do if they took the land from you? At the time, I laughed. You're being dramatic, I told him. But he wasn't. He knew them better than I did. Back at the cabin, I spread the documents across the table. Deeds, receipts, the letter. Silas's signature in that unmistakable left-leaning cursive. Then, I opened my laptop and started digging. County records, transfer history, transaction timelines. At first glance, the land had transferred to me 2 years ago, just like Silas said. The scan he kept matched the digital copy filed with the office. But something caught my eye. A line marked pending reassignment, flagged just 5 months ago. The initiating name? Eldrick Malraux? I leaned back, blinked hard. There it was. No wonder Royce had been ducking me at the gallery. If my father had tried to reverse the title using his connections and Silas's failing health as a shield, then the will reading tomorrow wasn't about wishes. It was about strategy. They weren't just writing me out. They were laundering the past. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Around 3:40 a.m., I started making copies. Multiple folders, flash drives. I highlighted every date, every witness signature. I didn't want revenge. I wanted backup, a paper army. Let them say I was emotional, dramatic, ungrateful. Let them try. By sunrise, I'd packed 2 manila envelopes, one for Royce and one for me. I grabbed a jacket, keys, and coffee from the gas station near the lake. On a hunch, I made a detour, just a few blocks off Route 7, where Mrs. Lita Marlin lived alone in a blue clapboard house with a front porch that always smelled faintly of lemon polish. She was in the garden, pruning a line of roses already in bloom despite the cold. "Leda," I said gently from the gate, "do you have a moment?" She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "I was wondering when you'd come by." We sat on the porch with mugs of weak coffee and a plate of cinnamon toast. She offered me the good chair, the one with the cushion, and said nothing until I did. "I just need to know," I said. "Did he talk about the cabin?" She nodded once, eyes focused on her hands. "More than once. He said it was yours. Said you were the only one who didn't look at the lake like a dollar sign." I stared down at the rim of my mug. "He said they'd fight you for it," she added, her voice low. He knew it was coming. The silence sat between us like another person. Before I left, Leda put her hand over mine. "They may own the narrative, Amy, but not the truth." I drove away slower than I should have, not because I was uncertain, but because I wasn't. My father could doctor documents. My mother could hold gallery exhibits and eulogize the version of him that fit her mold. But they couldn't unplant the seed he left in this town. And they sure as hell couldn't make me walk away this time. As I turned the corner toward town, I caught sight of a silver car parked outside the county office. Corinne again. Too early for errands. Too late to be casual. I slowed, parked across the street. From where I stood, I watched her hand the same envelope I saw yesterday to the front desk clerk. She was calm, confident. I took out my phone again and hit record. She didn't see me until she turned, and by then it didn't matter. Our eyes met briefly through the glass. She blinked, then smiled. Small, rehearsed, managerial. The same expression she used when she denied things that were clearly true. Later that afternoon, I reviewed the footage and emailed a copy to myself. I didn't plan to go viral. I just needed a record, something to hold next to the deeds, next to the letter, next to the version of reality they were trying to forge in silence. That night, I went back to the cabin one more time before the will reading. I lit a fire, more for comfort than warmth. I sat on the couch, wrapped in Silas's old flannel blanket, the one with the stitched initials at the corner, and watched the flames move like memory across wood. I wasn't scared of tomorrow. I wasn't waiting for anyone to acknowledge me anymore. I had what mattered, and I was done pretending their version of the story was the only one that counted. Her phone stayed silent, but for the first time, I slept with my legal folder by the bed. I didn't expect her to reply, and she didn't disappoint me. In fact, that silence felt almost louder than any lie she could have sent back. It was a confirmation. Not of guilt, they'd never admit that, but of strategy. They were watching, waiting, hoping I'd blink first. I didn't. By 9 a.m., I was at the Burlington County Records Office, standing in line behind a man arguing about a property line dispute. The clerk, a thin man with coffee-stained teeth and a name badge that read Doug, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When it was finally my turn, I leaned forward and spoke clearly. I'm here to request a printout of all recorded property transfers involving Silas Vexler in the past 3 years. Specifically, anything regarding Parcel 18B. Doug glanced at me, then down at his screen. You, the executor? No, I said. I'm the grantee on a prior deed. I have documentation. Would you like to see it? He hesitated, then nodded. I pulled the folder from my tote bag and laid the notarized deed down gently. No flair, just facts. His fingers tapped across the keyboard. After a moment, his eyes narrowed slightly. Well, he muttered, squinting at the screen. That's interesting. He clicked a few more tabs, then turned the monitor slightly toward me. There's a file here showing a transfer of Parcel 18B, dated 6 months before Mr. Vexler passed. Grantee listed as Delaney Malroe, notarized by Samuel Crowley. Crowley. That name lit up something in my brain. A financial advisor who'd worked with my father for decades. Also the same man who attended the memorial, but didn't look me in the eye once. Doug printed the record and handed it over. Looks like it was filed in person, paper copy, not e-filed. I scanned the form quickly. The signature, Silas's, was uneven, slanted, not the same firm hand from the documents I had. And the date? 2 days after he was admitted to the hospital for pneumonia. I looked back up. Can I request a certified copy of this, with timestamp metadata? Doug shrugged. Sure, might take a day. I nodded. I'll wait. Back at my room, still technically a rental above the old bakery, I sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, the fake deed and my real one side by side. The forged one was messy. Different font, different formatting. Subtle, but if you knew what to look for, it screamed rushed. I tried to log into my email archive, wanting to pull the last few messages from Royce, Silas's attorney. Nothing was there. I checked my spam folder. Nothing. Junk? Empty. Then I checked my account settings. Forwarding had been enabled to an address I didn't recognize. malroe.familydeskEdgemail.com. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. That wasn't a family email. That was a burner. A trap door built into my own account, set up just weeks after Silas died. I hadn't noticed it. I didn't think to. Until now. I disabled the forward, changed my password, and sat still for a full minute. Then I called Royce's office. "Hi, this is Amy Vexler. I'm just confirming. Did you send emails about the will proceedings earlier this year?" His assistant, a kind voice named Molly, said, "We did. 3, I believe. December, January, and February. But each one bounced back. We thought maybe you'd changed your contact info." "No, I didn't." I paused. "Can you resend them now?" "Of course." Within seconds, the messages arrived. All professional, all factual, and all damning in their absence these past few months. I sat back, the folder resting on my knees, the weight of the morning pressing into my ribs. This wasn't just personal, it wasn't just emotional, it was tactical, and they'd bet on me being too slow, too quiet, too removed to catch up. They were wrong. I took a photo of the original deed and attached it in a text message to Delaney. "You might want to get ahead of this before Mom and Dad dig the hole deeper." Message read. No reply. I waited 10 minutes. Then 20. Nothing. So I stopped waiting. That evening, with the sky turning the color of steel wool, I sat at the little dining table by the window and wrote one sentence. No preamble, no plea. I opened my messages, typed in my mother's number, and pressed send. If you force me to speak publicly, I will. And I'll bring paperwork. I didn't expect a response. And I didn't get one. But I slept. For the first time in weeks, I laid down with the folder beside me and closed my eyes without rehearsing comebacks or imagining their faces when I'd walk into that reading. Tomorrow was no longer something I feared. It was something I was walking toward, with proof in hand. The phone vibrated once. Royce's reply was short. Understood. 2 p.m. sharp. I stared at the message for a moment longer than I needed to, not because I doubted his word, but because I knew this meant the final curtain was about to rise. No more sidelines. No more whispers behind my back. Tomorrow, I'd be in that room, and I wouldn't be there to listen. That afternoon, I walked into Maplebank carrying the original deed in a protective sleeve and a printout of the county's time-stamped transfer record. I wore black slacks, a slate blouse, and no makeup. Just facts. That's all I needed now. The bank lobby was nearly empty. A woman in scrubs stood at the counter discussing overdraft charges, while a man behind her flipped through deposit slips impatiently. When it was my turn, the teller directed me to the back office. "Mr. Rowland will assist you," she said with a tight smile, like she already knew what was coming. Rowland, mid-50s, balding, impeccably dressed, looked up from his monitor as I stepped in. "How can I help you today?" "I'm here to access a safety deposit box under the name Silas Vexler," I said, handing him the slip and the deed. Box 2111. My grandfather told me it was jointly authorized. He glanced at the paper, then at his screen. His expression shifted subtly. Not alarm, but something close to inconvenience. "I see the box," he said. "But according to this, your name was removed from authorized access last month. The current authorized users are Eldrick Malroe and Delaney Malroe." I paused. "Excuse me?" "I understand this might be unexpected," he said, using the kind of tone someone would use to explain a weather delay or a restaurant closing early. "But an updated authorization form was submitted, notarized, and filed internally, without your name." "Who filed it?" He clicked. "Mr. Malroe, signed and verified by our notary." Of course it was. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I opened my bag, took out my notebook, and wrote down the time, Roland's name, the box number, and the date he claimed the update was made. "If this ends up in litigation," I said calmly, "I'll need documentation that I was denied access despite prior authorization and current legal ownership." Roland cleared his throat. "I can print a log of access history if that helps." "Please do." On my way out, the sun was just beginning to dip. The light on Main Street stretched long and gold through the windows of the coffee shop across the street. I reached my car, opened the door, and the screen lit up. Incoming call, Mom. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Amy, she said, her voice measured. What exactly do you think you're doing? You already know. There was a pause. We've been through so much. Why stir this all up now? Your father, he's not here to… I cut her off. Exactly, he's not. And maybe that's the only reason this is happening now. Another pause. She inhaled through her nose, sharp, clipped. You think you understand everything, but you don't. You always see betrayal in places where there's just reality. No, I said. I see betrayal because you signed off on it. I hung up before she could respond. Later that evening, I parked a block from the house. The lights were off in most windows, except the study, which used to be Silas's. It had once smelled like cedar and old books. The shelves had been lined with maps, journals, pressed wildflowers he kept between pages. Now it was storage. Last I heard, Corinne planned to knock down the back wall and turn it into an extension of the kitchen. I didn't use the front door. I walked around the side, past the hydrangeas Silas had planted for my grandmother, and tried the side entrance. Still the same rusted key. Inside, everything looked unfamiliar. The furniture was different. The artwork was generic, abstract cityscapes in brushed steel frames. I moved carefully, every step deliberate. In the old study, I scanned the room. The wall where Silas had hung my first watercolor was bare, but the painting he'd given me, his own lake scene, signed in the bottom right, was still there, leaned against the wall, collecting dust. I lifted the frame, turned it around, and found what I was looking for. Etched along the inner stretcher bar, in small but deliberate handwriting, to the one who sees the lake as shelter, not sail. This is yours. My throat tightened, not with grief, but with clarity. Behind the canvas, a folded envelope had been taped flat. I peeled it away and slipped it into my coat. Back in the car, under the dome light, I opened it. Inside, a duplicate copy of the original deed. Another notarized letter, this one signed by Silas's attorney, dated a full year before his hospitalization. A confirmation that the land had already changed hands, legally, permanently. And a single line at the bottom, handwritten by Silas. For Amy, no edits, no negotiations. I drove back to the cabin. On the porch, I lit the fireplace again. Not because I was cold, but because something about flames made truth feel cleaner. I laid out the documents on the table, organized them in the same order I'd use tomorrow if I had to hand them to Royce. Then I took a photo of the etched message behind the painting, and then I opened my phone, typed one message. I'll be attending the will reading. I suggest you bring the original will, not the redacted one. Sent to Royce. The reply came fast. Understood. 2 p.m. sharp. Delaney looked at the empty chair where Silas would have sat. He really planned all of this. I didn't answer her. Not because I didn't have words, but because for once, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. The truth was already speaking for me, louder than I ever could. The next day arrived gray and still, the kind of weather that made the town feel like it had its own held breath. I dressed without music, without ceremony, just clean lines and firm steps. Dark trousers, pressed, blouse buttoned to the collar. No jewelry, no perfume. I wanted to smell like reality. I parked 2 blocks from the law office. I didn't want them seeing me walk in like I was storming anything. I wanted to be still, certain. A stone in the river they couldn't reroute. The receptionist glanced up when I entered. She looked like she recognized me, but didn't know from where. Royce stepped into the lobby before she could ask, his face tight with something between discomfort and expectation. Amy, he said, voice low, they're already inside. Of course they were. I followed him down the hallway, each step echoing just enough to feel like a countdown. The room itself was warm, too warm, like they'd cranked the heat just enough to make you uncomfortable, but not enough to justify asking for it to be turned down. Eldrick, Corinne, and Delaney sat in a row along one side of the polished table. Royce gestured to the chair directly across from them, a place I'm sure they hoped would remain empty. I sat without looking at any of them. My folder landed on the table with a soft thud. Royce cleared his throat. "Well," he began, "thank you all for being here today. As you know, we're gathered for the formal reading of Silas Vexler's last will and testament, dated March of last year." Corinne crossed her legs, smoothing the hem of her skirt. Eldrick adjusted his watch. Delaney stared at her hands. Royce continued, "The will states the following. The family home is to be transferred to Corinne Vexler. Remaining business shares and liquid assets are to be divided evenly between Corinne and Eldrick Malraux. Personal effects, including heirlooms and journals, are to be given to Delaney Malraux." He paused, then glanced at me. "There is also a supplemental instruction," he said, reaching into his briefcase. "A video message recorded by Mr. Vexler. He requested it be played only if Amy Vexler is present." Corinne shifted in her chair. "Royce, I wasn't made aware of any—" Royce raised a hand. "It was filed separately, under a sealed clause. I received notice this morning to proceed." He placed a small tablet on the table and pressed play. The screen lit up. Silas appeared, sitting in his favorite porch chair at the cabin. He looked thinner than I remembered, but not frail, sharp as ever, voice clear. "If Amy is in the room, then she found the truth," he began. "If she isn't, then I failed to protect her." Eldrick exhaled loudly. Corinne shot him a look that said, "Don't start now." Silas continued. "The cabin, parcel 18B, was transferred to Amy 2 years ago. Because she asked for nothing. Because she understood what it meant to belong to something without owning it. Because she saw the land, not the value." He paused, as if searching for a word only I would understand. This decision was made in full sound mind. It was notarized, filed, and acknowledged by the county recorder's office. There is no ambiguity. There is no amendment. Royce clicked to pause the video. "That transfer stands. It is separate from the will and was enacted during Mr. Vexler's lifetime." The room fell quiet. Eldrick stood up abruptly, hand slapping the table. "She manipulated him in his final months. She wasn't even there." I didn't flinch. "You were the one who kept me away," I said evenly. "You changed my contact info, blocked my emails, rewrote access to the bank account. And you want to talk about manipulation?" Corinne's voice came out tight. "We built that life with him. We were there through every hospital visit, every prescription, every—" "You built a house," I said calmly. "He built a legacy. There's a difference." Delaney said nothing, just stared at the video still frozen on the screen. Silas's eyes locked somewhere past the lens, like he saw us all sitting here already. Royce stood. "That concludes the formal reading. Copies of the will and accompanying documentation will be emailed to all parties." No one moved. Eventually, Eldrick stormed out without a word. Corinne followed, clutching her bag like it might break open and spill her pride across the carpet. Only Delaney remained. She looked at me for the first time in weeks. "You're going to make this public, aren't you?" she asked, voice not angry, just tired. I gathered my folder, closed the flap slowly. "I don't need to," I said, walking toward the door. He already did. The lies had stopped, but the silence inside me would take longer to fix. I left the law office through the side exit, not because I was avoiding attention, but because I didn't want to waste the calm I'd fought so hard to earn. The sky had turned the color of pewter, and a cool wind chased leaves down the sidewalk like they were trying to outrun the past. I kept walking until the courthouse faded behind me, and the only sound was my own shoes scuffing against the pavement. 15 minutes later, I found myself standing in front of his grave. There were fresh lilies resting at the base of the headstone, deliberate, arranged, which meant Norma had been here. I didn't need to ask. I knelt, brushing my fingertips across the engraving. Silas Vexler, father, teacher, grandfather. No mention of legacy, no mention of land. But he wouldn't have wanted that. Titles had never impressed him. Something small caught my eye, a patch of loose soil near the stone's edge, like it had been disturbed and gently patted down again. I dug with my fingers, carefully, the way you would open a memory that might still sting. My nails hit metal. A small tin box. Plain. Scratched along the edge. I pried it open. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written in that familiar slanted hand. The script looked shakier than it once was, but it was still his. I sat down fully, knees in the grass, and opened it right there, under the tree we used to picnic beneath every spring when I was little. The letter was brief. 3 sentences. That's all it needed. They tried to rewrite you out. I never let them, and I never will. Tell the truth only if you need to, but never let anyone say you weren't mine. I didn't cry. I folded the paper back into its envelope and tucked it into my coat pocket like it was made of glass. It wasn't about exposing them anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. That night, back at the cabin, I was getting ready for bed when I noticed something odd about the old flip phone Norma had slipped into my tote bag after the will reading. I thought it was just nostalgia, a relic from Silas's drawer. But as I plugged it in, the screen lit up. 1 voice memo. No label. Just a timestamp. 8 months ago. I hit play. The static came first, then a shuffle. Then his voice. Quieter than usual, but steady. No, that's not what I want, he said. It's not. To Delaney. The land, it's for Amy. Then came another voice. Muffled, male, familiar. Silas, we just want what's best. You're not thinking clearly. Let us take care of this. Silas again, firmer this time. Don't put her name on it. She doesn't see it. She doesn't love it. Amy does. The file ended there. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long time. Not because I was shocked, but because there was finally no space left for doubt. The next morning, I walked into the office of the town attorney. Not Royce. A different man. Clean desk. No family photos. A nameplate that didn't carry my parents' fingerprints. He greeted me neutrally. I didn't need warmth. I needed accuracy. I'm not here to sue anyone, I told him. I just want the record to reflect what actually happened. He nodded. I placed the contents on the desk in slow, deliberate order. The original deed. The letter from Silas. The voice recording, the notarized letter from the painting. A printed screenshot of the video clip from the will reading, "He took his time." Reviewed each one like a teacher grading the final paper of a student he wasn't sure about yet. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed. This will require a formal review, but this is more than enough to file for a correction. That's all I'm asking for. Do you want to notify the parties involved? I shook my head. They already know. As I walked out of the building, the wind had picked up. Not cold, just alive. Outside City Hall, a clerk was pinning a legal notice to the bulletin board. I paused just long enough to read it. Land ownership correction. Parcel 18B, reinstated to Amy Vexler. No headlines, no microphone, just a piece of paper in a plastic sleeve, fluttering in the wind. A local reporter I vaguely recognized from high school came out of the building just as I turned to leave. He did a double take, then smiled awkwardly. Hey, you're... But I kept walking. I didn't need to tell it. He already had. And in that silence, I understood. Justice doesn't always heal, but it makes space for healing to begin. 2 weeks passed. Enough time for the town to do what towns always do, take sides quietly. You'd never hear it said outright, but the shift was clear. Neighbors who used to wave at my parents across the street now found reasons to keep their heads down, to pull into the driveway a little quicker. The grocery store cashier, who once laughed too loudly at Dad's jokes, handed Corinne her change without a word. There were no confrontations, no front-page exposés, just absence, the polite kind that lingers long after you've left the room. I didn't take satisfaction in it. That would have meant I was still fighting them. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I started walking into town more, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to take up space again, in my own name. One afternoon, I stepped into Bernard's bakery. He barely looked up from behind the counter, but as he boxed up a croissant, he said softly, "About time someone spoke up." I didn't respond. I just gave him a nod. It was enough. A few days later, Norma called. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't have to. She simply said, "Your mother left a message, said you could stop by if you wanted to collect anything from the house." I hesitated, then said, "Okay." The drive there was shorter than I remembered. Familiar roads, same old turns, but they felt hollow, like walking through a theater set after the actors had gone home. I parked in front of the house and didn't bother knocking. Norma opened the door before I reached it. "She's not here," she said. "Eldrick's out of town. Delaney's upstairs, I think." The inside looked the same, but colder. Not in temperature, just in spirit. I walked through the rooms with careful steps. They hadn't changed much, but the absence of Silas was louder now than it had ever been when he was alive. I took only what mattered. A faded photo of the two of us from the summer I turned 15. Me in paint-stained overalls, him laughing with his eyes closed. A scarf he bought for me when I got into art school, and one painting I'd done of the cabin porch, which he'd framed without telling me. I didn't go upstairs. Delaney didn't come down. As I was leaving, Norma handed me a paper bag. Inside was a thermos of tea and a wrapped sandwich. "You used to forget to eat when you were angry," she said. "I still do." She smiled, but her eyes didn't. Back at the cabin, I placed the photo on the bookshelf where Silas had kept his bird guides. I unfolded the scarf and laid it across the chair he always sat in. Then I looked around the room, not as it was, but as I wanted it to be. The next day, I hung a small wooden sign on the front gate. The Vexler House. No press, no announcement, just the name that had been erased from too many corners, finally carved into one that would last. Below it, a plaque. In memory of a man who knew the land wasn't just land. It was memory. I started rebuilding his study, restoring the shelves, dusting off the old filing cabinets, rehanging the maps he used to trace rivers with his finger. It wasn't about preserving the past exactly. It was about honoring what it meant. A week later, the local radio station called. A producer had heard about the correction at City Hall and asked if I'd come in to talk about it. Not as a scandal, but as a story of family, memory, and what it means to belong. I said yes. Sitting in that tiny booth with headphones pressing into my ears, I spoke softly into the mic. "It wasn't about winning something back," I said. "It was about not letting it be stolen silently." The host asked if I'd heard from my parents since. I paused. "Some people confuse silence with peace," I said. "I just learned to stop shouting into a wall." The station received letters for days, most from strangers. A few from people I'd forgotten I knew. One woman wrote, "I was erased too, just not on paper." It stayed with me. Late one afternoon, Norma joined me on the porch. She brought lemonade and sat without saying a word for almost 10 minutes. We watched the wind chase ripples across the lake. Finally, she asked, "Would you ever go back?" I turned my head toward her, smiled a little. "No," I said, but I kept what mattered. And that was enough. "Hi, I'm Matilda." My parents stood at a podium, read my obituary to a room full of people, and called my life a disgrace. They said I died alone, shamed, forgotten. But I wasn't dead. I was watching. They forged my death certificate, took my name, my voice, my work, and gave it to my sister. They even built a foundation in my memory, and made money off the silence they forced on me. But what happens when the woman they buried walks back into her own funeral? Would you stay quiet? Or would you make sure they heard you breathe? The day started like any other. The hum of my old coffee machine filled my tiny kitchen in Somerville. I stood barefoot, one hand resting on the chipped counter, the other wrapped around my favorite mug, the one with the crack along the handle I refused to throw away. I had 30 minutes before my shift at the caf, enough time to check my phone and maybe convince myself the world hadn't moved on without me. The notification blinked once, an unfamiliar number. No contact saved. It was from Elaine Dunbar. Elaine! I hadn't heard her name in over a decade. She used to live next door when we were kids, always trimming her roses at the exact same time every Saturday. Last I knew, she moved to Connecticut after her husband passed. I opened the message expecting something casual. Instead, it read, "I'm so sorry about your parents. I can't believe what I saw today." That was it. No hello, no question. Just that, and a link. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Something in my chest tightened, not fear, not quite. Dread, maybe? Or instinct. I tapped the video. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. A wide shot of a church interior. High ceilings. Wooden beams I knew by heart. St. John's. The same church my parents dragged me to every Christmas Eve until I was 15 and refused to sing another hymn. The camera zoomed in slowly. My father stood at the pulpit, rigid as always, holding a folded piece of paper in trembling hands. Beside him, my mother in black lace and pearls, clutching a tissue like she was auditioning for grief. Behind them, a closed casket. Next to it, a framed photograph. Of me. I dropped the phone. My mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. I didn't move. I couldn't. My own face stared back at me from the screen, frozen in a moment I didn't remember being captured. It was the headshot I used for my last job application. The video kept playing. My father's voice was steadier than it should have been. He read the words like they weren't his. She died far from home, in a place we don't speak of. It wasn't the life we wanted for her, but she was ours. And we pray, wherever she is now, that she's finally at peace. I clutched the counter, breath caught somewhere between my ribs and throat. What was this? Some kind of elaborate lie? A stunt? I hit rewind, watched it again, slower, louder. My mother's eyes dry, her expression practiced. She died in shame, she said, voice soft but audible. But she was still our daughter. I felt something crack behind my eyes, a sharp pulse of rage or heartbreak. I couldn't tell which. Shame? Is that the story they told? That it died in disgrace? I paused the video. I stared at my image framed next to a casket that held no body. My body. Because I was standing here alive, breathing, trembling, and somehow already gone. I pulled up Google, typed in my name, my full legal name. The first result was an obituary. My obituary. No funeral notice in the local paper, just a digital entry on a memorial site. Maya Siverton, 33. Deceased. No cause, no detail, just a birth date and a lie. I clicked deeper. Found a cached church bulletin from 2 weeks ago. This Sunday, we remember Maya. A life lost too soon. A soul misunderstood. Underneath, a photo from the service. Dozens of people. Familiar faces from the neighborhood. The woman who used to cut my hair. Mr. Delaney from the grocery store, all dressed in black. All there for me. And none of them had ever picked up a phone. My name, my face, my death, live-streamed. I sat down on the kitchen floor, the broken handle of my coffee mug digging into my leg. I didn't feel it. Not really. My thoughts were crawling over themselves. They didn't just cut me off. They didn't just disown me. They erased me. They rewrote my ending without telling me the chapter had closed. And the worst part? The world believed it. No one questioned it. No one checked. I replayed the final minute of the service. My father closed the paper. My mother bowed her head. A hymn played softly in the background. A moment of silence for a daughter they buried alive in reputation and rumor. My voice didn't shake when I whispered it to no one. They didn't lose me. They buried me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my own picture next to that casket, my father's lips moving in slow motion, my mother tilting her head just right for the camera. The next morning, the apartment felt colder than usual, even with the heater rattling through the wall. I made coffee, though it tasted like ash, and sat down in front of my laptop. The church's website had archived the entire service. I told myself I just wanted to check if it was real, if it was some elaborate prank, a dream I hadn't yet woken from. But the link loaded without hesitation. There they were again. Same image, same casket, same perfect lighting. This time, I scrolled past the video. Below it, someone had added a note. Her legacy lives on. Click here to watch how we rebuilt through the pain. I clicked. And that's when the second wave hit me harder than the first. A video presentation played, well-produced, clean transitions, music that sounded like it belonged in an insurance commercial. Callista stood at a podium, bathed in warm light, hands folded over her stomach, like she was delivering a TED Talk about grief and resilience. The words on the screen read, "Rebuilding with Integrity, the Siverton Turnaround." She spoke softly, with pauses in all the right places. Losing my sister was the hardest thing I've ever faced. But from that grief, we found purpose. We redesigned our brand, rebuilt our mission, and committed to ethical leadership. My jaw clenched. The logo that faded in behind her? I designed it. I still had the original files on an old flash drive. Her pitch deck? It was mine, word for word. She'd taken the layout, the formatting, even the tagline I once scribbled on a napkin at 3 a.m. during a panic attack in the break room. I wasn't just cut out of the picture. I had been skinned, repackaged, and sold as inspiration. My name? Not mentioned once. I watched the entire 15-minute presentation. Then I hit rewind and played it again. By noon, I'd found 3 more promotional videos, 2 articles quoting her as the soul of the company, and a podcast interview where she said, "Our family's loss taught me that clarity often comes through heartbreak." I slammed the laptop shut. It didn't stop there. I searched Maya Siverton obituary again. This time, I found posts on Facebook from old coworkers. One had shared the funeral video with the caption, "We lost a complicated soul. I hope she's at peace now." Another wrote, "I wish I had reached out more when she started drifting away." I hadn't drifted. I'd been pushed. They'd slammed every door, blocked every number, shredded every letter I sent. They didn't grieve me, they silenced me, and now they mourned me publicly, like it earned them redemption points. 20,000 views. 20,000 strangers watched people cry over a woman they helped bury. I couldn't look at the screen anymore. I needed air. I threw on a coat and walked through Somerville toward downtown Boston. The late afternoon sky had that dull gray hue, like the color didn't feel like showing up that day. The streets were still damp from last night's rain, and traffic hissed softly in the distance. I slipped my earbuds in, but I didn't play anything. I just wanted a layer between me and the world. As I crossed Beacon Street, a thought flickered through me, not loud, not clear, just a thread. If they could kill me in the public's eyes and profit from it, how long had this plan been in motion? I ended up at the public library and found a quiet desk in the back. I opened the Massachusetts Business Entity Search on the state's official site, typed in the company name. The CEO listing had changed. Callista Baird. The documentation was dated months after the obituary was published. No mention of a transition. No in memory of. Just her name, full control. I printed the page, printed 2 more. My designs, repurposed under a different title. One of them had my layout down to the pixelbut with her initials in the corner. I looked at the stack in front of me. I hadn't died of overdose or suicide or any other tragic fabrication they'd hinted at. I had died in narrative. They buried me to rewrite the story, to turn me into a lesson they could use for profit, for PR, for clean slates and curated redemption. I shoved the papers into a folder, stuffed it into my bag, and left the library. At the crosswalk, I paused. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, to show up at their doorstep wave the documents in their faces, demand an answer, demand an apology. But then what? They just say I was unstable, that I faked my own resurrection for attention, that the grief had made me delusional. Instead, I walked home. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same one I nearly collapsed under yesterday, and pulled out a notepad. At the top, I wrote, "Things they took." Then I began the list. The image hit me before I could even scroll. I wasn't looking for it. It just showed up. Someone had tagged it in a thread about grief and legacy on a community page. A high-res still from the funeral, perfectly lit, cropped just right. My face. The portrait had been framed in white lilies, just like I remembered it years ago when I gave it to my mother. It was a gift. My last attempt to say, I'm still part of this family. And now, it sat next to a plaque at a memorial I never asked for. The caption below the image, in engraved script, read, "In disgrace, we forgive her." Forgive me for what? I stared at the screen, my fingers numb around the phone. My skin felt tight, like it didn't fit right. That photo was taken during my 32nd birthday. I'd cooked dinner that night for all of them. No one showed up. Now it was being used as a symbol of repentance, their excuse to mourn a daughter they'd buried while she was still breathing. I closed the tab, but the words clung to the back of my mind like static. I opened my laptop and typed Callista Baird wedding into the search bar. I already knew she'd moved forward. What I didn't know was just how far. The video was easy to find. It was uploaded by a lifestyle magazine's YouTube channel with the title, CEO, Callista Baird's Intimate Garden Wedding in Cape Cod. I pressed play. There she was, laughing like nothing had ever gone wrong. The kind of curated joy people plan for months. I scrubbed through the video, trying to find a single frame where my absence might have been felt. My name, my photo, a seat left empty. There was none of it. Instead, there were cousins who once cried with me over movie nights, now twirling in linen dresses with flutes of champagne. Childhood friends I used to sneak cigarettes with, now clapping politely as Callista toasted to new beginnings. It wasn't the celebration that stung. It was the erasure. It was how they replaced me, like it'd been a rough draft someone finally decided to crumple up and toss. Then it happened. Near the end of the video, during a speech segment, Callista stood in front of a small group. Her voice was calm, her hands neatly folded. "This day reminds me that healing doesn't always come with closure," she said. "Sometimes it comes with courage." A little girl's voice broke through, barely loud enough to catch, but clear. "Where's Aunt Matilda?" I froze. The crowd in the video shifted. Some chuckled nervously. Callista's jaw clenched for just a breath. The mic cut. The video jumped to the next scene, her husband's toast. But it was too late. One tiny, innocent voice, had cracked the whole performance open. That girl still remembered me. Somewhere, in a room filled with people who'd convinced themselves I was better off forgotten, a child still believed I existed. I paused the video, letting the screen fade to black. I couldn't explain what that moment did to me. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't closure, but it was something. A tether, maybe. I put on my coat and stepped out into the dusk, letting the air slap some clarity into me. The walk to the Charles River wasn't long, but I needed the motion. The world around me was soft and dull headlights reflecting on pavement, distant dog barks, and the smell of wet leaves. I reached the riverside and sat on a bench, facing the water. No one was around, just the hum of the city in the background and my thoughts finally daring to speak. When someone disappears long enough, people rewrite the story, I murmured. But children don't lie. And photos don't forget. I pulled a small leather notebook from my bag. It wasn't digital. That was important to me. No, something about putting ink on paper felt more real, less erasable. I flipped to a clean page and wrote, "My name is Matilda Siverton. I'm not dead. I'm not disgraced. I'm not done." My handwriting was shaky, uneven, but it was mine. As the sky dimmed into full blue, I slipped the notebook back into my bag. The cold bit at my fingers, and I tucked them into my coat pockets, pressing them flat against my sides. They could hang my picture on a church wall, build lies into legacy, carve judgment into marble. But they could not speak for me. If they wouldn't say my name, I would write it where no one could erase it. The envelope was cream-colored, thick paper, slightly worn at the edges. It sat there in my mailbox like it belonged, except it didn't. It had been forwarded from my old address, the one they stripped from me after I disappeared from their version of the world. No return address, just my name. Clean cursive, too neat to be an accident. Inside, a glossy invitation folded in thirds, the kind reserved for politicians or retirement fundraisers. At the top, Baird & Kummer Ethics Forum Rebuilding Trust After Loss. And there, on the RSVP card, was my name, my full name, not scribbled in, printed. And not just that, it had my signature. I stared at the swoop of letters that mirrored my own handwriting. Not similar, identical. I knew that loop on the Y. I developed it in college when I thought it made my signature look more confident. I pulled out an old notebook from a drawer in the kitchen, flipped to a memo I wrote back in the final year I worked with them. I laid the 2 pages side by side. Same font, same phrasing. They hadn't just taken my work, they'd taken my voice, my identity. My name was being used to promote a company that had declared me dead. For a few seconds, I just stood there, leaning against the countertop, the silence in the apartment compressing into my lungs. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at that elegant, expensive paper as if it might start speaking back. I took a photo of it and forwarded it to Kevin, my attorney. Subject line, "This just arrived." He called 20 minutes later. "This is more than just a misstep," he said. "If they're using your name knowingly, we can pursue a cease and desist, possibly more, depending on what else turns up." I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with another call. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. Then something told me to. "Matilda?" The voice on the other end cracked mid-word. "It's Dellen." I hadn't heard that voice in over 3 years. My aunt used to be the only one who softened the tension at family dinners. She'd pass me mashed potatoes without passive aggression. She'd sit next to me when my mother made her opinion too obvious, and then, just like the others, she vanished. No calls, no replies. Until now. "I shouldn't be calling, I know," she said. "But I saw the post the wedding video. The little girl, I stayed quiet." "I have something I think you need to hear," she continued. "I should have done this sooner." That's when she sent the file. No explanation, just a download link titled junemeeting.wav. I opened it later that night. Alone. Laptop propped on the table, headphones in. The sound was muffled at first, like the microphone was under someone's sleeve. I recognized the voices almost immediately. Callista's voice rang out steady, professional, measured. "As long as she stays quiet, we're safe. No one asks questions. The further we move, the easier it gets." My mother's voice, "It's not like we did anything illegal." She cut herself off. And then my father, flat, cold. "If she resurfaces, we'll say it's a mental breakdown. Easy to prove. Her history, it helps." I pulled the headphones off like they were burning. I didn't even realize my hands had curled into fists until I stood up and nearly knocked the chair over. They weren't just reacting to me being gone. They'd built a whole narrative contingency plans, cover stories. They'd taken my silence and weaponized it. And now they were printing my name on things I never agreed to, painting my absence as a symptom of instability. I once believed maybe shame had driven them to pretend I didn't exist. But this wasn't shame. Shame requires guilt. This was strategy. The next morning, I walked to the Boston Public Library. I needed space, and more than that, I needed clarity. I sat at a table near the back with my laptop and a legal pad, played the recording again. This time, I wrote everything down, timestamps, quotes, every word they said. Not just for court. For me. Every line was a nail in the coffin they'd built for me while I was still breathing. I drafted a cease and desist letter addressed directly to Callista. It was short, formal, unemotional. Then I opened a blank document, started a new note to Kevin, attached the audio file, and ended it with, One more move like this, and I won't knock. I'll kick the door in. I didn't feel scared when I hit send. I felt like someone who'd finally stopped holding her breath. The building looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 90s brick exterior, brass door handles dulled with fingerprints, and a small plaque that read Tolland and Associates. No receptionist. Just a wooden chair in the hallway and the scent of old carpet cleaner. I liked it immediately. Kevin Tolland looked younger than I expected. Early 30s, glasses smudged with fingerprints, a cardigan with one elbow patch stitched by hand. He didn't blink when I slid the folder across his desk, just nodded and opened it. Passports, lease agreements, W-2s, tax returns, medical records, employment contracts from the last 3 years. Jesus, he muttered, flipping through. You're not just alive, you're thorough. That's what being erased teaches you, I said. You keep receipts. He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Okay. This isn't just a case of mistaken identity. This is willful legal misrepresentation. They filed a false death certificate? No accident, I said. They used it to transfer ownership, scrub records, and redirect the business. He didn't hesitate. We can challenge it. It'll be messy. But we can do it. We spent the next hour walking through steps filing motions, requesting internal memos, prepping for court if needed. His confidence didn't feel like arrogance. It felt like someone willing to go to war with a map in hand. By the time I stepped back out onto the street, the light had changed. Still overcast, but sharper. Less heavy. I stopped for lunch and brought my laptop to a corner booth. I hadn't even unwrapped the sandwich when a new email came through. Subject line, I've stayed quiet long enough. No greeting. Just the sender's name Theo Landry. I clicked. Theo had been one of the junior strategists at Baird & Co., back when I was still fighting to make marketing campaigns that didn't rely on gimmicks. We weren't close, but he was always observant, never talked much in meetings, but took notes like his life depended on it. His email was short. I don't know if you'll remember me. I didn't know what happened to you until someone shared that funeral video. It didn't sit right. Then I started digging. Attached were 6 documents, screenshots, archived internal emails, presentations. The file names were Gut Punches, Q4, Rebrand, Final, V2.pie Hex, Baird, Legacy, Deck 2022, Emma Structure, Circopy.doc. Each one was built on the bones of work it created years ago. Same frameworks, same phrasing, even the tagline I once wrote on a whiteboard during an all-nighter. Integrity is earned, not branded. Except now, Callista had inserted her name. Her photo, her quote. Theo's note ended with, I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I was afraid. But this isn't right. You deserve to be seen for what you built. I sat there in that booth, the buzz of conversation around me, barely registering. People walked past the window with dogs, strollers, phones pressed to their ears. Life didn't stop for this, but something inside me did. I opened my files, pulled together every document, Theo's, mine, screenshots of the funeral footage, the invite, the forged signature, the video links. That night, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, organizing slides like I was pitching a campaign again. Except this time, the product was the truth. I created a folder, Reclamation. Inside, I built the deck. Slide 1, my face beside my funeral photo. Slide 2, the real documents. Slide 3, the copied decks. Slide 4, the audio recording from my father. Slide 5, a single quote. Well, say it's mental instability. When it was done, I emailed it to one address. The shared family email used for business inquiries. Subject, one chance. I wrote, plainly, I have everything, every receipt, every word, every file. You have one chance to make this right quietly. If I don't hear from you by Friday, I go public. This is not a threat. It's a line. Step over it and you'll see how alive I really am. No reply came, but I saw the red receipt. The next morning, I walked to the courthouse. Not to file anything, not yet. I just stood there on the steps, Let them see my name in the logbook. Let them know I was circling. I didn't need to shout. Sometimes silence is strategy. I didn't want to go. But when the message came through an anonymous email, no signature, just a line that read, "You'll want to hear what she says tonight at the gala," I didn't hesitate. The ballroom was colder than I remembered. Boston Marriott Long Wharf. Same chandeliers. Same polished floor reflecting overpriced heels and rented tuxedos. I walked in like a ghost, unseen but completely aware of every eye that glanced past me without recognition. Callista was scheduled to speak at 8:00 p.m. sharp. The crowd had already gathered. Familiar faces peppered the room, former clients, ex-colleagues, even a few distant relatives who had no idea they were about to cheer for a lie. I stayed near the back, behind a marble pillar just off the bar. My dress was black, simple, nothing to draw attention. That night wasn't about me being noticed. It was about me seeing, really seeing, how deep this farce had gone. The host took the stage first, all fake humility and over-rehearsed charm. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate not just innovation, but resilience. And who better to speak to that than our keynote guest Callista Baird?" Applause followed like a trained response. Callista walked onto the stage in a soft blue gown, a string of pearls around her neck, and a sadness in her expression that made my skin crawl. She looked gracious, as if sorrow had polished her into something more worthy. "I lost my sister 3 years ago," she began, "to pain, to chaos, to a kind of silence that makes healing feel impossible." I didn't move. My fingers gripped the inside of my coat pocket, wrapping tight around the envelope, still containing the cease and desist letter, still sealed, still unused. "I used to think grief would break me," she continued, pausing perfectly for dramatic effect. "But I chose to survive. I chose to become more." That was the moment the applause swelled loud, affirming, nauseating. I couldn't hear anything else for a few seconds. Just my own pulse hammering through my skull. My sister had stood there and turned my life, my erasure, into her narrative arc. She'd taken my funeral and built herself a podium on top of it. I didn't walk out, not yet. I stayed through dessert, through small talk and wine refills, until the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed. Then I went home. By the time I got through the front door of my apartment, I already had my laptop open. I didn't change clothes. I didn't even turn on the main light. Just sat at the kitchen table, bathed in the pale glow of the screen, and typed in her name again. It didn't take long. A fundraising page. In honor of Maya Siverton, sister, our sorrow, our strength. I read every word like it might explode. They'd launched a nonprofit, the Siverton Resilience Trust, focused on mental health awareness and grief processing. Every paragraph dripped with staged regret and manufactured warmth. Maya's passing was tragic, but her silence speaks loudly. In her name, we rise. There were photos of Miss smiling, arms crossed, probably taken from an old company bio. One of them was edited into a candlelit frame with the words, "Remembering in Grace." And then, the final blow. A donation tier named after me, the Matilda Circle, for those who rise above broken beginnings. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Instead, I clicked the report page button. Once. Then again, through 2 more platforms. And then I opened a new document, an open letter. Not to them. To the public. To the ones who donated, the ones who believed the story told by the ones who buried me. I wrote, "I am not a symbol. I am not a cautionary tale. I am not a silent lesson. I am alive. And your donations are being made in the name of a lie." I signed it, name, date. Attached the documents Kevin helped me compile. The funeral footage, the audio recording, screenshots from the fundraiser. I scheduled it to send at 6 a.m. the next morning to 3 local reporters, a watchdog nonprofit, and one of the same online publications that had covered Callista's wedding. Then I sat back. And I breathed. If they wouldn't stop building on my grave, it'd show them exactly what the dead looked like when they got back up. The message came in at 7:42 a.m., just as I was reaching for my second cup of coffee. A friend from college, now a social worker, forwarded me a clip making the rounds on an advocacy blog. The subject line said only, "You need to see this." I didn't even finish pouring. The video was a grainy, dimly lit confessional, my voice, my cadence, but not my words. In the clip, I sat on a couch, eyes downcast, speaking slowly. I stole from my family's business. I didn't know how to stop. I ruined their name, and they still forgave me. I felt the cup tilt in my hand, coffee sloshing over the rim. That voice wasn't mine, not anymore. It was pulled from an old podcast I'd recorded for a startup panel 3 years ago, back when my biggest worry was if my click-through rates were tanking. They'd taken my voice, spliced it with AI, and turned it into a confession. Callista hadn't just buried me. She was now trying to cremate the pieces. I closed the video and called Kevin. "It's a deep fake," I said without even saying hello. "Send it," he replied. "Well, trace it." An hour later, I was elbows deep in metadata, browser tabs stacked across my screen. Kevin pinged me from his endhead, found the production credits tied to a boutique PR agency, one that had handled Baird & Co.'s rebrand last year. "It's them," he said. "Direct contract. You'll get the invoice." While he worked the legal side, I followed the digital breadcrumbs. It didn't take long to uncover the next layer. A launch video, brightly colored, upbeat music, footage of smiling employees in open workspaces. At the center of it all, Callista. Described as the visionary behind the rebuild, she stood at a whiteboard, walking through a pitch almost word for word what I'd presented 4 years ago at our annual retreat. The timeline, the voiceover, the goals, I could have narrated it in my sleep. Except now, her name sat in bold in the lower third of the screen. Founder, strategist, survivor. They took my voice, my ideas, my history, and dressed them up in pearls and press releases. Enough. That afternoon, I built the breakdown. On one side of the screen, the confession, stitched together, stuttering at the edges. On the other, the original podcast clip, full length, untouched. I layered the waveform analysis Kevin provided, labeled the AI fingerprint signature, attached the invoice from the PR firm, signed off by Callista herself. Then I filmed a single 2-minute intro. No edits, no dramatics. Just me. My name is Matilda Siverton. I'm alive. I never confessed to a crime. What you've seen is a fabrication deliberately produced to uphold a lie built on my erasure. I looked straight into the lens. If they want to silence me with a ghost, they'll have to bury me again. Good luck. Kevin helped push it to 3 contacts in the media, 1 from my former network, 2 from watchdog groups. The response was swift. By 6:04 p.m., the clip was gaining traction. Within an hour, a hashtag started trending. Were voice of the living. Then another. Not your dead girl. People were furious. Tech journalists dissected the fake. Legal accounts quoted my statement. A therapist's TikTok with 500,000 followers used my case to warn about narrative manipulation. I didn't bask in it. I didn't refresh every 5 minutes. I just sat in my kitchen, finally feeling like the air in the room was mine again. Then came the email. Subject: Media interview request. We want your side. I stared at the screen, unmoving. They wanted my side now, not because they believed me, but because the lie had lost its shine. I clicked reply. My fingers didn't hesitate. The message came in on a Thursday morning. No name, no signature, just a single sentence. They're holding a private memorial. Sunday, same church. I read it 3 times before I moved. Not out of fear. It was the kind of silence before an earthquake where everything holds still just long enough for you to recognize what's coming. I opened the closet and laid out the black dress. Not mourning black, not church black. This was surgical, unapologetically fitted, unwrinkled, plain. The kind of fabric that didn't weep. By Saturday night, I had packed the folder. Death certificate, forged. Birth certificate, real. Employment contracts, voice comparison charts, printed screenshots, and a flash drive. I didn't need anyone to believe me. I needed them to hear me. Sunday arrived cold and sharp. I parked 3 blocks from St. John's and walked the rest of the way on foot. The building looked the same, like it hadn't noticed the weight of the lies it had housed just weeks before. Stained glass glowed against the overcast sky, and someone had placed white chrysanthemums at the door. Inside, the congregation whispered. Most were in gray or navy, reserved grief, rehearsed sympathy. I slipped through the side entrance and stood behind the last pew, just far enough to watch, just close enough to feel the heat building under my skin. My mother stood first. She spoke like she was reading from a storybook. She was difficult. She challenged us, but we never stopped loving her. My father followed, monotone and careful. She was not perfect, but forgiveness is not earned by perfection. And then Callista. Pearls again. She loved her pearls. To the sister I lost, she began, pausing with faux gravity, and the life I rebuilt in her memory. They toasted. In a church, wine in hand, glasses lifted like I was some cautionary tale that turned into cash flow and pity applause. Then the priest raised his hand. Let us take a moment of silence for Maya Siverton. May her soul find the peace she could not find here. The room fell still. The doors opened. Not a slam, not a scream, just the long, ancient groan of 2 heavy doors splitting apart as I stepped into the aisle. First, a gasp, then another. A wine glass fell and shattered near the 3rd row. My mother crumpled backward, caught by the arm of a man I didn't recognize. My father stared, his hand still holding the folded eulogy. Callista turned, too slow to be shocked, too fast to be calm. I kept walking, one step, then another, heels tapping across the marble. My dress made no noise. My presence did. By the time I reached the front, the room wasn't breathing. I turned to face the portrait, still on the easel beside the altar, lilies still fresh beside my fake grave. I raised the document. This, I said, is a forgery. I slid the death certificate onto the pulpit. This voice? I pressed the remote. The AV system kicked in. My podcast clip played on one side of the screen, the deep fake confession beside it. The waveform overlay blinked like an EKG, exposing a heartbeat that never flatlined. Not mine, I said. But this pain? This silence? Every second of that is mine. I scanned their faces. Some looked away, some couldn't, and Callistache just stood there, frozen, lips parted but wordless. You didn't lose a daughter, I said, locking eyes with my father. You buried one, alive, because she didn't fit your image, because she made you uncomfortable, because she didn't disappear fast enough. The silence was a vacuum, no prayers, no music, just stillness. I reached into my bag and placed one final item on the altar, a small card with my name, Matilda Siverton, clean, whole, not engraved in stone, not crossed out. I don't want your forgiveness, I said quietly. I want my name back. And then I left. The sound of my heels followed me to the end of the aisle. I didn't slam the doors behind me. I didn't have to. Let them echo. 2 weeks passed. I didn't hear from them, not a call, not an email, not even one of those vague legal threats wrapped in polite language. But the world heard me loud and clear. The deep fake scandal hit the press like a slow landslide. At first, it was a Ripple One blog post, a few retweets, some comments questioning the authenticity of the confession video. Then came the breakdowns from tech journalists, side-by-side audio comparisons, legal experts weighing in on the implications. Then came the statement from the Siverton Resilience Trust. It was short, impersonal. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the foundation will cease operations effective immediately. No apology, no name, just silence in a polished envelope. And yet, it was loud enough. Callista's public persona began to unravel not with screams, but with questions. Her LinkedIn was quietly taken down. The company's Instagram shifted to private. Articles that once praised her vision were updated with footnotes about ongoing legal matters. My legal status was restored without ceremony. The death certificate was revoked, archived with a single line in the public record. Declared living. Documentation confirmed. That sentence held more weight than anything they'd ever said to me. Online, strangers began calling me the woman who came back. A few used the word survivor, but that never sat right with me. I wasn't surviving them. I'd outgrown them. On a cool Thursday morning, I took the train up to Newburyport, not to see anyone, not to confront. I didn't need to. I walked into the cemetery alone, the sky hanging low with slate clouds that didn't quite know if they wanted to rain. I found the stone easily. There it was, my name, carved in granite, birth year correct. The year of death, a fiction they sold as truth. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything, really. Just a strange stillness in my ribs. I sat on the edge of the grass, pulled a folded piece of paper from my coat, and tucked it gently beneath the base of the stone. No fanfare, no drama. The note said only, "You can keep the stone. I'm keeping the rest of me." I stood, brushed the dirt from my coat, and walked back to the street. The cab driver didn't ask questions, just nodded when I gave him the station's name. Back in Boston, life had returned to something close to normal, but not the version I knew before. I wasn't hiding anymore. I picked up more shifts at the CAF, resumed volunteering at the library once a week. I began teaching a small marketing workshop at the local community center, which felt like building from scratch, but without needing to prove anything to anyone. One afternoon, I sat for a short interview with a local journalist. She was gentle, listened more than she talked. She asked why I hadn't sued, why I hadn't gone further, louder, publicer. I answered plainly. They erased me to protect what they built, but I'm still here not to destroy, just to exist. She blinked, nodded, and said it was the most grounded response she'd heard in months. That evening, I bought a new journal. On the cover, in thick black ink, I wrote, Matilda Siverton. I left the first page blank, not out of fear, but because not everything needs to be rushed into definition. The apartment was quiet, not heavy, not hollow, just enough stillness to breathe. I stood by the window, watching traffic hum below, people living lives that had nothing to do with mine, and for once, that felt good. Closure isn't always a finish line. Sometimes it's a door you close without needing to hear the lock click. No one from my family ever reached out. But for the first time in years, I didn't wait for them to. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. Some ghosts stay gone, even if they no longer haunt you.